There are some of the most athletic players in the National Football League. Most of them start from a young age and wind up playing collegiate and professionally. However, playing in such a vicious game like football comes with more risk than rewards. A lot of fans want to witness the exciting action on the field, including the big hits. As much as I would love to eliminate concussions, you can never completely take the risk of the injury out of the game. We have and will always strive to make the game as safe as possible for our professional athletes down to youth athletes first learning how to play. My name is Roger Goodell, and I am the current NFL commissioner. I have served in this position since 2006 for an astounding 18 years. During my time as the commissioner, I have made safety-related rule changes, encouraged advancements in equipment, improved medical protocols, care, and changed the way we teach the game. Deservedly so, the discussion in the public is about concussions and how they happen, how they can be prevented with new helmet technology, what is known about their short-term and long-term impact, and medical and return to play guidelines that should be used. That is what I want to focus on here today. Now, comes up next is how a concussion happens. Most concussions in youth football players occur from helmet-to-helmet hits to the head. Concussions are very prevalent in contact sport, and they aren't going to go away unless something is done about it. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is a concussion? Well, a concussion is defined as a neurologic injury resulting from a blow to the head or body which causes an alteration in mental status. Players who are suffering from a concussion injury usually will have the following signs and symptoms: headaches, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, and balance problems, fatigue, trouble sleeping, drowsiness, sensitivity to light or noise, blurred vision, difficulty remembering, and difficulty toward concentrating. Over the last decade, concussions in sports has become a significant health concern in the public's eyes. The Center for Disease Control labels a concussion as a silent epidemic. Over 300,000 concussions cases have occurred each year, and that is way too many. According to a study conducted by Capstone, Lovell, Pellman, and Vienna in 2006, the number of high school students playing football that sustained post-injury concussions before sustaining another concussion within the same season was just under 1 at 0.89 for every high school player. Up next is how to decrease concussions with improved helmet technology. So one solution to decreasing concussions is new helmet technology that can reduce concussions. The brain is a very delicate structure, and it should be surrounded with as much protection at all costs. In today's contact sport like football, most helmets provide solid protection with keeping the force that gets to the skull after a blow to the head. However, lessening the force isn't the only problem. After each play, it involves a minor to serious blow to the head. Waves of kinetic energy are sent directly to the skull and enters the brain. This is caused by the motion of a moving object. Therefore, Michigan engineers paired together and began to make changes to the standard helmets. These changes enhance the protection for players who receive repeated head blows in football. The first thing the team decided to do was approach a project called Head Health Challenge 3. This is a program promoted by the National Football League and the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Their overall objective in the program was to come up with new and improved technology for sports players who participate in contact sports and to better protect those players who come into contact with another force of impact. The team decided that helmets needed more padding on the side of the helmet. So after searching through catalogs, the team decided on a few materials that they could combine together. They decided to use a material called viscous elastomer for the innermost layer. This material bounces back to its original shape after something like a blow to the head deforms it. In a sense, the foam takes the blow and not the head itself. Compared to other helmets, only 1/5 of the kinetic energy from an impact made it through to the head. The design is now one of 5 finalists in the Head Helmet Challenge competition. What makes this team and their continuous improvement so good is that they are always looking on ways to improve many different types of helmets for other sports like rugby, hockey, and as well as football. The team plans to continue their experiment with different types of polymers in the next year, creating safer equipment for youth and football players. Next is what we call short and long-term effects after concussions. The most common long-term effects are permanent brain injury or death. Permanent brain injuries that lead to death have increased over time. During the 1997 to 2006 football seasons, there were 50 cases of permanent disability and 38 deaths due to cerebral injuries at all levels of play in 2 to 3 months post-concussion injury. Therefore, a player with a history of one concussion has an increased risk of concussions in comparison to a player who has never been concussed, and the risk of a future concussion increases with each additional concussion. Dr. Ann McKee, a neuropathologist, conducted a study and assessed 202 former NFL players who are now deceased to determine if there was the presence of chronic traumatic encephalopathy present in their brains. Of the 202 players, 177 at the age of 66 years old was neuropathologically diagnosed with CTE. The age for those diagnosed with mild CTE was 44 years old, and those who had the presence of severe CTE was 71 years old. The most common cause of death for players with mild CTE was suicide. The second most common cause of death for players who sustained a mild CTE was other, and the third most common was neurodegenerative. However, the most common short-term effect from a concussion is lengthier recovery time. Concussion symptoms can last as long as 10 days or even months after. Sometimes they can persist for a year or more depending on the severity and amount of concussion sustained in a football player's career. What you should be looking for as a parent are the signs of headaches and fatigue for which can last for years. If these signs continue after the 7 to 10 day time period, it is recommended that you see a physician right away to receive the proper steps to care for your child. Young males aged 10 to 19 years of age had the highest rate of sports concussions. Also, high school players have an annual risk of 5 to 10%, and the risk is higher during gameplay in contrast to practice. Now, up next is medical and return to play guidelines. In order to protect youth football athletes, you need to have medical guidelines of return to play guidelines in place to evaluate a player before making a determination if it is safe to allow each player to re-enter the game. It is important that a trained neurologist is placed on the sideline to determine what guidelines each player falls under after sustaining a concussion. The first concussion guideline I would recommend is called SAC, which stands for Standard Assessment of Concussion. Any trained medical staff, like athletic trainers or a neurologist, can perform this test. This system was developed in line with regulations laid out by the American Academy of Neurology in response to recommendations for the development of a standardized policy with which concussions can be assessed on the sidelines. The standardized assessment of concussion consists of 4 components: orientation, immediate memory, concentration, and delayed recall. Validation studies revealed that SAC was accurate in determining if players was concussed or not. The use of SAC can precisely spot mental status changes related to sports-related concussions and help in the diagnosing and management of concussion injuries. The second recommendation I present to you is the utilization of the baseline and serial post-concussion assessment. The baseline serial concussion assessment is used to document pre- and post-concussion from each player. This assessment is more detailed and includes more complex tasks than the sideline assessment or any other screening measure. This type of assessment allows for sideline medical staff to determine if an athlete's concussion symptoms have subsided. This usually occurs within 7 to 10 days post-concussion. Most importantly, having medical staff and a certified neurologist on the sideline to conduct pre-concussion and post-concussion tests on the sideline allows for a comprehensive approach to spotting a concussion and appropriately documenting each one. My final recommendation to make is the use of computerized assessment. This system is the best approach to assessing sports-related concussions for many reasons. One of those reasons being it offers an objective approach to the administration of the concussion test and scoring the assessment. Next, the biggest reason being time and cost effectiveness, as well as having accessible personnel to perform concussion tests. Lastly, if players move around to different teams, the information can be easily transferred to the next team through the database. Now, there are only 3 computerized testing systems available, and they are immediate measurements of performance and cognitive testing and concussion resolution index. Any of the computerized testing systems can be used by neuropsychologists to effectively identify the presence of even the mildest concussive injuries. One of many problems youth football organizations have is allowing players to re-enter the game after taking a blow to the head. According to Purcell, in 2009, younger athletes require more time to recover and have more significant neurocognitive consequences from concussions. So how do you prevent youth players from placing themselves in a position? You place medical supervision on the sideline. This is the difference between youth athletes and adult athletes. Currently, during youth football games, there is no medical supervision present to prevent players from re-entering the game after suffering from a concussion. Youth athletes are more of a target to brain injuries. A study conducted proved that football players 7 years of age who had a concussion showed that younger children performed worse on intellectual testing than adults. Each athlete is different and may respond in different ways. Some may recover in a few days, or some may take days or even weeks to months to recover. However, the decision on return to play must be taken cautiously and individualized depending on the athlete. The most accepted protocol for any player to return to play is the stepwise exertion protocol, which is recommended by the Concussion and Sport Group. Within this protocol, each player must recover at rest, must go through the stepwise progression of increasing exertion. In the stepwise exertion protocol, each player must remain symptom-free for 24 hours after each step, and if he or she remains symptom-free, they can progress to the next step. However, this progression must be medically supervised. If any athlete has any recurring symptoms, they must rest for a period of 24 to 48 hours before attempting to progress through the exertion protocol. However, return to play decisions will include several variables such as the nature of the injury, history of previous concussions, and physical and cognitive function. If a player is diagnosed with a concussion, he or she is held out of the remainder of the game. This player needs physical and cognitive rest to allow a possible resolution within 7 to 10 days following the concussion injury. If a player doesn't recover within the 7 to 10 day window, they must undergo a neuropsychological test. If the player is symptom-free after 7 to 10 days, they must enter the stepwise exertion protocol to be fully cleared to return to play. If the player passes the final test, they may return to play. In closing, I really believe this will be a workable solution to many concussion injuries. If youth sports organizations were to adapt the policies and procedures that other sports organizations use to reduce concussion injuries, it would fulfill the requirements of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and make this a safer game for youth athletes.